Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tearing down the way we think about time. We're looking at a time tracking strategy that honestly acts like a profound psychological mirror. It's called the 168-hour audit. If you've ever felt like your week just vanishes, poof, gone, or wondered if your daily habits actually match up with your deepest values, well, this is exactly what we need to unpack. We're pulling directly from some fascinating source documents covering a moral recognition therapy session, and man, it reveals how simply tracking our time can completely shatter the stories we tell ourselves.
The absolute crux of this whole thing is a fixed, unavoidable reality that we all share. 168 hours in a single week. Whether you're a CEO, a busy student, or someone going through intensive therapy, the math literally doesn't budge. 7 days, 24 hours, 168 hours total. It's the ultimate equalizer, right? And exactly how we allocate those hours, well, that's the absolute truest reflection of what we actually prioritize.
Which leads us to this incredibly sharp, almost uncomfortable question. Are you using your 168 hours to build your life or to avoid it? To answer that, we're going to look at a real-life case study from an MRT, that's moral recognition therapy session. This drops us right into the intense tension between a guy named David, who's analyzing his life, and his facilitator, Chris, who is basically holding up a very clear mirror to David's choices.
Which brings us to Section 1, the fixed 168 hours, a mechanical reality. In Step 4 of this therapy program, individuals have to become radically aware of exactly where their time goes. They use a specific spreadsheet to mechanically log every single hour of the week. Literally, one cell equals 1 hour. You map out sleep, chores, family time, and in David's case, a massive block of time dedicated entirely to AI immersion and documentation. Now, the facilitator notes that counting these hours, it's not supposed to be easy, but it forces this unavoidable mechanical reality check. There's just no hiding from the raw math of where your attention is flowing. When you break down David's handwritten categories, you see the usual stuff: family, friends, chores, health. But his time is overwhelmingly consumed by AI immersion, philosophy, and documentation. I mean, he actually crossed out personal development to replace it with AI documentation. It's wild. It physically reveals that his attention is flowing heavily toward digital systems and, unseen audiences, rather than his wife and family right in front of him. So let's look at Section 2, the cognitive armor trap, volume as a symptom. This brings us to a really fascinating psychological trap identified by the group's facilitator, Chris. Instead of simply completing what was supposed to be a 3-page assignment for the therapy step, David wrote a staggering 169 pages of analysis. Yeah, 169 pages. The group obviously found this absolutely mind-blowing. Chris points out the structural irony here. David is literally using sheer volume to evade reality. The volume of his intellectual production is the symptom. He's using a massive amount of time and effort just to avoid doing the simple, kind of unglamorous emotional work he actually needs to do. There's a concept from the sources that perfectly captures this trap. It's called cognitive armor. It's this idea that honesty itself becomes the armor. You can name every flaw so precisely that the naming actually stands in for changing. It shows how we can use extreme articulacy and endless data collection to talk about our flaws without ever actually fixing them. David's numbers were totally honest. He didn't lie on a spreadsheet at all, but his highly articulate 169-page self-awareness just became a giant defense mechanism. He named his problems so precisely that the mere act of naming them felt like progress. It stood in for actual behavioral change. And here is where Chris makes a deeply, deeply profound point. He notes that unlike someone who's, say, losing their house or facing jail time over bad habits, David can essentially afford his flaws. His family is still there, his house is still there. Because he isn't facing immediate catastrophic ruin, he has to change out of choice rather than consequence. And let's be honest, that is a much, much harder pivot to make, simply because the discomfort isn't forcing his hand yet. Moving to Section 3, the 90-10 variance rule, where change actually happens. So, how is behavioral change actually generated mathematically? Well, Chris provides an incredible insight here. About 90% of our week consists of repeating habits. We basically do the exact same things, day in and day out on autopilot. This means the only place real, meaningful change can happen is within that remaining 10% variance. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. That's impossible anyway. You just have to seize control of that 10% and schedule something actively different into it. That tiny little slice, that's your battlefield for reclaiming your life.
Which leads into Section 4, happiness versus true joy. Internal versus external.
To figure out what to actually put into that 10% variance, the group broke down a really vital distinction. There's a very sharp line between happiness and true joy. Happiness is so often driven by external validation, right? How big your house is, audience feedback, or in David's case, AI systems and online metrics. But true joy, that comes internally. It's somatic, it's relational, and it stems directly from mending injuries with the people you love. Joy lives entirely on the side of the line where absolutely nothing gets captured, documented, or posted for an audience.
To prove this, Chris actually had the group analyze their best of times. When they looked back at their absolute happiest memories, they realized something profound. None of their greatest moments involved money, lottery wins, or huge material success. Chris's own best moments included the birth of his daughter and later, her cancer remission. These moments were entirely rooted in family, real human connection, and focused, present attention. That is exactly where true joy resides. And honestly, that is what should fill your 10% variance. Finally, Section 5, From Awareness to Action, MRT Step 5.
Okay, so we've mapped the time, we've identified the armor. Now we've got to move from simply being aware of our flaws to taking concrete action. To truly rebuild trust, there are a few very unglamorous steps required to turn all these philosophical insights into tangible life adjustments. Step 1, apologize without excuse. Seriously, don't explain why you did it, just own the impact. Step 2, accept the facts without demanding immediate forgiveness. And step 3, which is probably the most crucial one, establish regular automatic contact. If you look at Chris's raw, handwritten notes from the session, it really physically anchors this whole abstract concept. He writes down things like, heal injuries you inflicted, including to self. He clearly notes that an amend is an apology without an excuse. You just accept the facts without requiring the other person to instantly forgive you and make you feel better. Because rebuilding trust isn't some grand 169-page document. It's just quiet, repeated action.
The group's notes also dive into the damage caused by simply detaching and keeping your distance. There's a phrase they use, preemptive neglect and abandonment by detaching and distance. It's such a stark reminder that inaction is in itself an action. When you retreat into your work, into your screens, or into your own cognitive armor, that detachment deeply, profoundly hurts the people around you. As proof of this process actually working, Chris shared an incredibly moving personal example. He didn't just intellectually reframe his relationship with his daughter. No, he scheduled an automatic 6 p.m. call to her every Tuesday and Thursday, and he did it consistently, week after week, until her brain just expected it, until she learned without a shadow of a doubt that she could count on him. It wasn't about one massive, dramatic apology. It was about a recurring, predictable presence dropped right into that 10% variance. So, the final question you really have to ask yourself after going through this explainer is this. How are you going to use your 10% variance to stop avoiding your life and start actually repairing it? Are you going to write another mental manifesto about all your flaws? Or are you going to schedule one simple recurring action to show up for someone you love? Those 168 hours, they're taking right now. The choice of how to fill them is entirely yours.